In 1965, Pernell Roberts did something no actor would dare. He burned his costume outside the studio. He walked away from a $1 million offer, and he never looked back. But this wasn't about money. It was about a co-star he couldn't stand. Someone who rewrote scripts to steal the spotlight. Someone who had his face removed from promotional posters. The tension between them exploded into shouting matches and threats. But what made him so angry? And who was the co-star he blamed for ruining everything? The answer is going to surprise you. Pernell Roberts was born on May 18, 1928, in Waycross, Georgia. And from the start, his world carried a mix of strict guidance and quiet rebellion. He was the only child of Pernell Sr., a Dr. Pepper salesman, and Minnie Myrtle, and he grew up being pushed into the choir at First Trinity Methodist Church. Week after week, he stood there and listened to sermons that felt empty to him. And over time, he began to resent what he saw as people saying one thing and living another. That feeling planted something inside him, and it stayed with him. In high school, while he played horn and tuba in the band and joined the glee club, he also faced moments that shook him. One day, his basketball coach made a racist remark, and instead of staying quiet, Roberts walked off the team right in the middle of the season. It was a young man's first real stand against unfairness, and it hinted at how he would move through the rest of his life. After finishing high school, he tried Georgia Tech, but lasted only one semester in 1946. He said later that it looked to him like a place built to produce conformists, and he wanted no part of it. He felt the weight of his family's finances too, so he stepped away and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at 18. The military shaped him in its own rough way. He played tuba and sousaphone in the Marine Corps band, but even there he refused to ignore injustice. One night in the barracks, a sergeant made an anti-civil rights joke, and Roberts hit him. The punch cost him his rank, yet it revealed something deeper about who he was becoming. During those 2 years of service, he saw how segregation shaped people's lives. And when he left the Marines, he carried those lessons with him. He took jobs as a butcher and forest ranger. And during off hours, he slipped into black jazz clubs even when the law forbade it. Each step pulled him further from the world he grew up in and closer to the man he wanted to be. His path led him next to the University of Maryland, where he threw himself into theater. He played major roles in productions like Othello and Antigone, and in only a short time he won 4 leading parts. Even then, someone told him he was too intense for leads, a statement that lodged in him like a splinter. He left without a degree, joking later that he had distinguished himself at both Georgia Tech and Maryland by flunking out. What he really meant was that he wasn't built for safe paths or polite limits. He joined community theater, worked summer stock, and before long moved to New York with a stubborn desire to become an actor who meant something. In 1949, he stepped onto a professional stage for the first time at the Olney Theater in Maryland. He appeared in The Man Who Came to Dinner with Kitty Carlisle and earned only $25 a week. After getting paid, he often ended up drinking with castmates, then sleeping outside when the money ran out. It was hard, but he kept going because each show shaped him a little more. That same summer, he headed to Bryn Mawr College Theater in Philadelphia for 8 weeks of summer stock. There, he played a psychopathic killer in Night Must Fall, and people remembered the performance for its intensity. He also played Alfred Doolittle in Pygmalion and slipped in his own improvised socialist rants that startled the audience. Slowly, he was building a reputation as someone who pushed against expectations every time he stepped on stage. By the early 1950s, he was performing with the Arena Stage Company in Washington, D.C. To stay afloat, he worked as a butcher, a forest ranger, and even a railroad riveter during the day, then rushed to perform Shakespeare at night. He portrayed Petruchio, Mercutio, and even Hamlet. Arena stage helped refine him, but it also tested his principles. The moment he was asked to play a demeaning cameo built around a racist stereotype, he refused. Management was furious. Roberts didn't care. He would not compromise simply to stay employed. Those years rolled into the off-Broadway scene, where survival became a daily task. He acted in The Adding Machine and The Firebrand for as little as $10 a gig. He admitted later in the 1970s that he once traded sex for a role during the McCarthy era, a brutally honest confession about what desperate actors faced at a time when blacklists destroyed careers. Even with little money and no certainty, he kept working, pulling together a resume that revealed a man with grit and talent who refused to bend. When he received a scholarship offer from Juilliard, he surprised everyone by turning it down so he could join summer stock tours across the country. Those tours took him from one small stage to another, and he met crowds that loved him and crowds that didn't. In Alabama, he was arrested after integrating a whites-only stage by entering through the back door. He knew what he was doing, and he accepted the consequences without regret. It was another moment where he chose principle over comfort, something that kept happening through his life. Everything changed in 1959 when he landed the role of Adam Cartwright on Bonanza. He stood out among more than 200 actors and earned $3,000 an episode. There were doubts about him in the beginning, whispers about whether he fit the image NBC wanted, but he pushed through. He demanded script changes that removed racist tropes, and he insisted on doing things on his own terms, even if it annoyed the producers. Once the show aired, audiences were drawn to Adam's depth. Season 1 pulled around 30 million viewers each episode, and Roberts added his own voice to certain scripts, including rewriting parts of Crucible to challenge segregation. Writers cut half of what he added, yet even the remaining parts carried his message. As Bonanza grew, NBC poured more than $2 million into it by 1962. Behind the scenes, Roberts often disagreed with Lorne Greene, who played Ben Cartwright. He felt Greene's character carried a gentle form of prejudice, something he quietly called Pa's soft bigotry. When Roberts leaked memos criticizing the show's racial politics, he nearly lost his job. Still, he refused to soften his views. During this same period, his fan base exploded. People formed Adam Cartwright fan clubs across the country, and he received thousands of letters every week. Fame never changed his priorities. While co-stars bought cars and ranch replicas, Roberts donated half his salary to the NAACP and civil rights movements. He supported the Selma to Montgomery marches and several sit-ins, and his activism earned him the nickname the Liberal Cartwright. It also brought heavy backlash from conservative groups, but he moved forward anyway. After he left Bonanza in 1965, he returned to guest roles in shows like Gunsmoke. His 1967 appearance as a cold-blooded gunfighter caught the attention of critics who saw the same fire he showed on stage years earlier. Yet the money from Bonanza stopped coming faster than he expected, so he pushed for fair compensation and threatened a lawsuit for $200,000 in residuals he believed he was owed. The fight revealed how unfair TV contracts could be, especially for actors who walked away from hit shows. His stand helped open conversations for future performers who wanted better treatment after leaving long-running series. It started in 1964, when something inside Pernell Roberts finally snapped during a Bonanza production meeting. He had spent years swallowing his frustration, years pretending the shallow stories and the cheap jokes didn't bother him. But on that day, when he was handed yet another script that felt empty and cruel, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He slammed the pages on the table so hard that everyone in the room froze. He looked straight at Michael Landon and the writers, and said they had cut Adam Cartwright's scenes down to scraps just to push Little Joe into every corner of the spotlight. Witnesses remembered the room going still before Roberts' voice filled it, calling out what he believed was selfishness and weak writing. Then he stormed out, leaving stunned assistants whispering that he might never return. This moment didn't end there. It lit a fire that kept growing, and by the end of 1964, Roberts was boycotting events, refusing photo shoots, and openly criticizing the show's lack of diversity. NBC threatened legal action as the feud began to swallow the entire set. And then came February 3rd, 1965. Another closed-door meeting. Another script that gave Adam Cartwright barely 3 minutes of screen time. Roberts felt pushed into a corner and slammed his script again, this time calling Landon a self-centered actor right there in NBC's 7th-floor conference room. The room cracked into chaos, and the meeting ended even faster than it began. Roberts walked straight out of the building and contacted his lawyer. NBC panicked because they had over $2 million tied up in Bonanza, and a public fight between two leads could burn the whole house down. But the damage between Roberts and Landon was done, and insiders later said this was the moment Roberts became quietly blacklisted from NBC projects. A few months earlier, in October 1964, Roberts had already taken the conflict to the public. He stood in front of reporters in Los Angeles and accused NBC of breaking his lead actor contract. Within hours, the LA Times released the headline, "Ponderosa Power Struggle," which spread across the country. Roberts revealed a contract clause that forbade him from speaking about politics or social issues. He saw it as a gag meant to silence his stance on racism and civil rights. He said NBC had even threatened to sue him for refusing to act in scenes where Native Americans were played by white actors. The story lasted for weeks. It refused to fade, and the lawsuit carried on for 3 years until it ended in a confidential settlement. By then, many in Hollywood saw Roberts as someone willing to burn his career to stand by what he believed. There had been one person Roberts hoped would stand with him, and that was Dan Blocker. They had been close before Bonanza, almost like brothers. But when Roberts began boycotting racist scripts, Blocker chose to stay silent. He tried to keep peace on set and refused to pick a side. Roberts later said Blocker had the heart, but not the spine, and the friendship tore apart. During one tense day of filming, Roberts walked off set in the middle of a scene he felt was offensive. Blocker kept going because he didn't want to fight the producers. Roberts never forgot it. He said that moment broke his trust in Hollywood more than anything else. The tension didn't stop there. Roberts had always looked to Lorne Greene as the elder figure on set, someone who could speak up. But Greene avoided conflict because he wanted to protect his gentlemanly reputation. The quiet cracks between them widened until late 1964, when an argument over another script exploded into a physical fight. Crew members had to pull them apart. Season 5 nearly stopped production for a week. Greene refused to talk about it later, but Roberts said Greene's choice to stay silent on serious issues pushed progress backward. He kept jumping between shows. On The Big Valley in 1967 and 1968, he played Patrick Madigan and Ed Tanner. Off-camera, he clashed with Barbara Stanwyck after adding improvised lines that pointed out racial injustice. Some lines asked why a town had only one colored man in its sheriff's office. Stanwyck was furious because she felt it ruined the tone of the script. But Roberts couldn't stop himself. He had marched in Selma in 1965 and believed television should do better. His activism became part of everything he touched, even when it cost him roles. He continued fighting battles through his work. On Hawaii 5-0 in 1971, he played Lon Phillips and improvised a scene that highlighted racial tension. CBS executives cut the dialogue, worried that Southern affiliates would react. Roberts's intensity stayed in the final cut, but the censorship reminded him how tightly Hollywood guarded its image. The same year, he appeared on The Virginian and later clashed with James Drury during a panel. Roberts called Western's escapism poison because they ignored problems like the Vietnam War. Drury told him to quit whining, and the crowd felt the divide between two different visions of what television should be. On Marcus Welby, M.D. in 1971, Roberts took on the role of Dr. Bartell and twisted it into a critique of the white savior trope. The backlash was immediate. Medical lobby groups sent hate mail, furious about the storyline. Roberts earned $15,000 for the role and donated every cent to the Black Panthers, a group often attacked by the media. It showed exactly where he stood, both as a man and an artist. He kept trying to break through with new projects. In 1976, he joined the miniseries Captains and Kings as Beathwaite. When the show failed, he blamed the Post-Bonanza curse, saying the industry never let him move on. His character was supposed to shine, but the slow pacing made the entire production crumble. Still, he pushed forward, refusing to let typecasting define him. Then something unexpected happened. In 1979, he returned to television in a way no one saw coming. Trapper John M.D. offered him a role that felt grounded and human. He was 51 by then, older than most primetime leads, but he stepped into the character with a calm strength shaped by his own years of struggle. The show ran for 7 seasons and even earned him an Emmy nomination in 1981. Many viewers didn't realize the role carried a personal weight for him. He had watched his father age with little security and realized he needed stability too. This show offered that, and he took it with both hands. He didn't play it safe once he got there. Even in a medical drama, he pushed for civil rights themes, pointing out hospital bias and discrimination. Sponsors complained. Networks argued. He kept going. Between 1981 and 1986, he appeared in 151 episodes and earned up to $50,000 each week. The show often ranked in the top 20, yet Roberts continued leaking memos and demanding better writing, just as he had done years earlier on Bonanza. Through the 1980s and 1990s, he made guest appearances that carried quiet meaning. A Love Boat episode in 1980 played with rumors surrounding him. His final on-screen role appeared in 1997 on Diagnosis Murder, where he whispered last ride to the camera during filming, a moment that stayed with those who worked with him. And then came 1986. Trapper John M.D. was canceled even though it remained a top 20 show. It stunned the cast. Roberts' reaction was pure Roberts. He threw a party for everyone using the finale's budget and delivered a farewell speech that mocked network executives for making decisions that ignored the audience. It became one of the show's most memorable stories because it felt like the perfect ending for a man who never blended in, never stayed quiet, and never stopped fighting for stories that felt honest. Pernell Roberts met Vera Mowry when he was still trying to find his footing as an actor. And on a cold January day in 1951, they married in Pittsburgh. Their son, Jonathan Christopher, arrived in October that same year, and for a short time, their life felt steady. But by 1953, Pernell left for New York to chase work on stage, and the distance kept stretching until it finally broke them apart. They divorced in 1959 with no public drama, yet the weight of that separation stayed with both of them. Pernell was already drifting into fame, while Vera focused on her life in academia and built a respected career at Hunter College and the City University of New York. Even so, the birth of Jonathan remained a turning point he carried for the rest of his life. It was the one part of that marriage he never spoke of without a quiet ache. When he married Judith Lebrecht in October 1962, he was at the height of his Bonanza success. Crowds adored him, fan clubs grew by the week, and the work never stopped. At first, he tried to balance everything, but after he walked away from Bonanza in 1965, his attention shifted to civil rights activism. He was marching for the NDAACP, speaking at rallies, and traveling constantly. Judith felt herself fading into the background, while he poured his energy into causes he believed mattered more than anything else. By 1971, she filed for divorce, calling his absence and dedication to activism emotional cruelty. The lawsuit brought a short wave of media noise before it all went quiet again. She slipped out of the spotlight, and Pernell kept marching. Friends later said the marriage fell apart because Judith felt alone in a house filled with a man who was always somewhere else. Then came Cara Nack in 1972. They married that June in Los Angeles, and this marriage held longer than any other, stretching across 24 years. Cara was a writer and activist, and at first their values seemed to lock together easily. But life with Pernell was never simple because he valued principle over comfort. He refused high-paying jobs he felt were shallow, so there were long months when they lived modestly while he took work as a forest ranger or whatever kept him honest. Cara wrote later that loving him meant accepting years of financial strain and long absences whenever his activism flared. Still, they shared a stability he never found before, even if cracks slowly widened. They divorced in 1996, gently and without hostility, and both looked back on the marriage with respect. She kept saying that living with a man of principle could be both inspiring and exhausting. A year later, in 1997, Pernell married Eleanor Criswell. He was 68 by then, with a lifetime of battles behind him. Eleanor was a psychologist with a calming way of taking weight off his shoulders. She protected him quietly, even burning hate mail before he could see it. They had no children, and Pernell sometimes spoke of his sterile rebel life with regret, wishing he had built a fuller family. But Eleanor stayed beside him while he grieved the loss of his son and dealt with old wounds that never fully healed. Their years together were private, steady, and without noise, and she became the person who helped him walk through the last decade of his life. The greatest wound he carried came in 1989, when Jonathan died in a motorcycle accident at age 38. The news broke him. He vanished from public view for 6 months, and later said his principles killed his boy because Jonathan needed a father instead of a fighter. Jonathan had studied at Franconia College and was living in California when the accident happened, and Pernell never spoke publicly about it afterward. Friends said something inside him dimmed forever. It shaped the rest of his life, sharpening his regrets and deepening his silence. Long before Bonanza or Hollywood fame, Pernell grew up in Waycross, Georgia in 1928, in a place where segregation shaped every street. After serving in the Marines, he saw injustice with fresh eyes and refused to stand by quietly. By the early 1950s, he was already donating to the NAACP and joining marches, even though doing so risked everything for a white Southern man of that era. Georgia's NAACP chapters were targeted by lawmakers, and members were harassed and threatened. He pushed forward anyway, inspired by sermons that spoke of equality and by what he witnessed in integrated military units. He supported legal battles with whatever he earned from acting jobs and let activism sit at the center of his life. That fire carried into his work on Bonanza. In 1963, he refused to perform a script that portrayed Native Americans as savages. When NBC resisted, he threatened to strike, which could have cost millions because Bonanza was the most expensive show on television, with production costs above $2 million a season. After days of tension, the network rewrote the script, but punished him by cutting his pay by 20%. He didn't back down. He believed it was better to lose money than to help spread racism, and that belief marked one of the first major on-set boycotts for racial justice in Hollywood. As the years passed, he became even more outspoken. During the 1970s, he blasted networks at Emmy panels, naming executives who refused to cast black actors in lead roles. His speeches upset peers, and his feud with Lorne Greene became well known. Some said Roberts cared more about justice than friendships, and he agreed. Silence was never an option for him. Even without social media, those recordings spread quickly among industry circles, showing a man with a voice that refused to soften. In the late 1970s, when he moved into Trapper John M.D., he used the show as a new stage for civil rights storytelling. He pushed for episodes about hospital segregation and discrimination, and some writers worried the network would shut them down. FBI files later showed he was watched for what they called subversive plots, because he kept inserting messages about racial equality. Millions of viewers saw those episodes, and they sparked conversations that television rarely touched at the time, but his activism came with a steep price. After leaving Bonanza, he received more than 10,000 hate letters filled with slurs and threats. He framed 100 of them on his wall, calling them his badges of war. They reminded him of what he was fighting against and why he could never soften his stance. His clashes with co-stars only added to the pressure. In 1964, he confronted Michael Landon, accusing him of trying to make himself bigger instead of improving the show. Landon had been rewriting scripts to center his character and even pushed to remove Roberts from promotional material. When Roberts saw Season 6 posters along Sunset Boulevard without his image, he slammed his contract on the table and threatened legal action. From that moment on, the two barely spoke off camera. Lorne Greene, who played the family patriarch, disappointed him in a different way. Roberts begged him to stand up against racist scripts, but Greene always avoided conflict. He would say he didn't want trouble, which made Roberts feel abandoned. At a Season 4 wrap party, after Greene again refused to protest a harmful script, Roberts muttered "sellout" under his breath and walked away. Later tapes revealed that he never forgave Greene for choosing harmony over integrity. Dan Blocker, his closest friend on the show, hurt him too. Producers asked Blocker to convince Roberts to stay on Bonanza. Instead, Blocker told reporters it might help the story if Adam Cartwright died. After Roberts left, he called Blocker, hoping to repair things, but Blocker never returned the call. Roberts said years later that he hoped for a brother, but got a peacemaker who avoided taking sides. Their friendship never recovered, and Roberts chose not to attend Blocker's funeral in 1972. The tension extended beyond Bonanza. In 1963, he confronted Chuck Connors after seeing him berate a young assistant on the set of The Rifleman. Connors snapped bitter quitter, and Roberts shot back that he was an abuser. The two avoided each other for years after that fight because Pernell refused to share space with someone who mistreated crew members. In 2007, he learned he had pancreatic cancer, and he kept the diagnosis private. He retreated to his Malibu home, refusing chemotherapy because he wanted dignity more than prolonged suffering. He lived quietly for nearly 3 years before passing away on January 24, 2010, at 81. His estate, around $5 million, went entirely to Eleanor. After his death, word spread slowly because he had always guarded his privacy.